Hi, I'm Peter Crawford-Kahrl, and I'm going to be talking about our recent paper, How to Use Nondeterminism in Cryptography. Or more accurately, I should say, how to use limited nondeterminism in cryptography. First, I'm going to define some motivation behind what I even mean by limited nondeterminism and why we should care about it, and define the core concept, and then we'll move into a couple of our main results. So first, why in the world would we even want to use nondeterminism of any sort in cryptographic applications? Nondeterminism, and specifically nondeterministic reductions, are extremely powerful in complexity theory and computational hardness and have led to many very useful, interesting results. And we would like to import some of this framework into cryptography, but there's a central problem in that. In the majority of cryptographic contexts, nondeterminism ends up being almost entirely useless. A nondeterministic adversary can simply guess the secret key or the password and break whatever sort of encryption scheme you want. And so if you want a reduction that says if X crypto system is secure in a certain way, then a nondeterministic adversary could solve Y. With the standard definitions of nondeterminism, this won't work. The adversary will simply ask, what's the password? So how do we fix this? Well, first, let's think about a standard classical problem in cryptography, inverting a one-way function. By this, I mean, let's say we have a function that's taking n-bit strings to m-bit strings, and we are given a uniform random input, un in this case, to that function, and we compute the function of that, we get y, and our task is to find any x star such that f of x star is equal to y. The success probability is going to be the probability over the internal random coins that an adversary has access to, and over the input x. This is our standard classical one-way function. Now let's think about why this would fail in a non-deterministic setting. And this will be a kind of our archetypal counterexample. Given y, that is f of some x, simply non-deterministically guess x star, and then check that f of x star is equal to y. This would completely work. Our key insight, and what the rest of the paper in this talk will be based around, is the insight, what if the adversary cannot actually non-deterministically guess all of x star, and can only maybe guess some portion of it? That will be what we define to be limited non-determinism. So let's now define what we actually mean by limited non-determinism. By limited non-deterministic adversaries, or limited nondeterminism, what I really mean, and what I will define, and we'll use for the rest of the talk, is a class of adversaries. You can think of Arthur Merlin proofs as kind of the underlying framework. Class of adversaries A, that are randomized polytime adversaries, that can flip their own internal random coins, and they can get at most 5 bits from Merlin. The adversary A will receive some input Y, will flip its own coins, send that to Merlin, and get back a witness W, as long as we're just assuming that the witness is less than or equal to phi in length. So let's now return to our one-way function definition and see how this changes in the limited non-deterministic setting. This was the original classical definition of a one-way function. And what we're going to do is we're going to modify the success probability now to capture this limited non-deterministic idea. Now, the success probability is the probability over x and r that there exists a witness. You can think of this as the witness that Merlin sends back to our adversary. There exists a witness that is 5 bits long, such that A, when given the input f of x, a random string r, and the witness w actually does compute a successful answer. Now, the results that we'll have later will have to do with sublinear adversaries and sub-exponential security. And so I will define what I mean by those two things right here. By a sublinearly limited non-deterministic adversary, I mean an adversary with access to n to the epsilon non-deterministic bits for some epsilon in between 0 and 1. Thinking back to the one-way function, this is an adversary that cannot guess the entire x star string. It will not have enough non-deterministic bits to do it, but it will have quite a few. By sub-exponentially secure, I mean something that satisfies the property that for all polytime adversaries, there exists some epsilon so that the adversary's success chance is 2 to the minus n to the epsilon. Now, is a sublinearly limited non-deterministic adversary even a feasible assumption to make? Well, people will assume exponential and sub-exponential security in cryptographic settings, and the assumption of a sublinearly limited non-deterministic adversary is actually weaker than the traditional sub-exponential security assumption, because given sub-exponential time, you could simply brute force search through all sublinear witnesses to see if any of them work. In addition, this is stronger than leakage resilience and really corresponds to arbitrary bounded leakage. So it sits right in between. We'll see that this assumption is weaker than a traditional sub-exponential security, but will give us some very, very interesting, nice results. So now let's move into those results. The first result I'm going to talk about is dream hardness amplification. And then we'll see how we can extract many hardcore bits and build some efficient PRGs as well. For dream hardness amplification, this is the theorem that we're going to prove over the next few slides. Suppose I have a one-way function, f, that is 1/2 one-way for sublinearly limited non-deterministic adversaries. And by that I mean the sublinearly limited non-deterministic adversaries have a success chance of no more than 1/2. Then a small direct product of f is sub-exponentially one-way. In a classical setting, a small direct product of f, if f was a standard weak one-way function, would not be sub-exponentially one-way, would simply be a negligible success chance. Now, I do want to note that our results do not just apply to one-way functions, but apply to any sort of efficiently verifiable search problem. An efficiently verifiable search problem in this case could be a one-way function, could be a collision-resistant hash function, or something else. Anything that can be framed in this sort of framework works. So, to prove the statement from the previous slide, we're going to need a couple of lemmas. The first one being a probability boosting lemma. This lemma says the following. If A is an adversary that uses fine non-deterministic bits, and there is a good set on which A has a success probability bounded below by delta, then by using log 2 over delta additional non-deterministic bits, we can get the success probability to be greater than 0.999 on that same good set. In this case, I'm thinking of delta as something not too small, and this 0.99 is arbitrarily high, effectively. Now, there's a couple things to note. This good set will cause us a little bit of trouble later, but it can be fixed by a direct product argument. But for now, we can imagine the good set is everything. Imagine we had a uniform lower bound on the success probability. Informally, the probability boosting lemma says, given an element-wise success probability of delta, to reach a very high success probability, we only need log 2 over delta additional non-deterministic bits. To connect this between sublinear and sub-exponential security, that additional log 2 over delta non-deterministic bits means if our success probability was originally approximately 2 to the minus n to the c, we'd only need n to the c extra non-deterministic bits, approximately, to get a very high success chance. And so this is the connection that we're seeing between sub-exponential and sublinear. Now, to prove this lemma, here is our proof sketch. Imagine we have A, it's going to have some certain success chance. We'd want to take a whole lot of copies of A and run them simultaneously. This would be how you do it classically. The problem is, if the success chance of A is too low, you'd have to take too many copies of A, and that will blow up the time complexity far too much and exceed our budget. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a bunch of copies of A simultaneously, use the same witness bit for all of them, and that's actually pretty important. We can't use a new witness for each run because we'll completely run out of our witness budget. But we'll run them all simultaneously, and we'll cleverly pick the random coins that we're feeding into each copy of A. We'll do that with a hitting set generator. And so here's the hitting set generator lemma. This is possibly folklore. Given a strongly universal hash family and a target set that has at least density delta, then the probability that if you sample a hash at random, there exists at least one input to the hash that hits your target set is greater than the expression given at the bottom there. Framing this in our framework, we're going to think of the target set as the set of good random strings that will result in success, and that cardinality of W, cardinality of the witnesses, is going to be 2 to the phi. If you have phi witness bits, then you get a very, very good boost in success probability, something along these lines. We want to hit a target set T, so we're going to use an internal random coin as a description of a hash, and then after a little bit of parameter chasing, as long as the length of W is log 2 over delta bits, then the probability that there exists at least one W so that hashing that W hits your target set T is going to be greater than or equal to 1/2. So let's return to our proof sketch, and we've modified it a little bit here. We have a bunch of copies of A running in parallel. We are feeding into them random coins that are themselves the output of a hitting set generator. We're using a witness W to run A, and we're using a witness W prime to run the hitting set generator. Now, the probability that a specific R1 prime is good is greater than or equal to 1/2. So by taking enough copies, the probability that at least one is good is greater than 0.999. Now, a very important note here. W and W prime are picked after R1 prime, R2 prime, etc. are picked. The witness bits are always picked at the very, very end, after everything else. Putting all that together, we have obtained our probability boosting lemma. Just remember, what does this probability boosting lemma say? It says if we have a lower bound that is not too low on our success chance of a non-deterministic adversary, then we can get an arbitrarily high success chance. Now, there is one final detail that we need to visit, which is the good set. In that previous slide, we were assuming there was a good set of inputs so that the success chance was not too low. This is why we actually do need concatenations. This is a classic result here. Canetti, Hervé, Sudan, Trevisan, Valdan, and we in 2007. And a nice paper say that the concatenations effectively have good sets in them. Given a Turing machine M that inverts F, and given Y is equal to F of X, if we randomly pick an index, randomly plant Y into that Turing machine and into the adversary M, and fill other inputs randomly and run the adversary, then there is a large set of Ys on which that new adversary M prime succeeds not too much less than the original success chance of M. So that is enough to complete the proof of our main result here. Here's the theorem stated in full generality. For some poly p of n and an f, a one-way function that is 1 minus 1 over p one way, then a small direct product, f, in fact, direct producted with itself to n p of n times, is now sub-exponentially one way for sublinearly limited non-deterministic adversaries, and the proof is as follows. We have m that inverts f to the little m. We construct m prime via the guess, index, and plant, the concatenation direct product idea. That will have a large good set. We boost the success chance of everything in the good set to be very, very high, and we simply bookkeep witnesses and random bits. Okay, now I'm going to talk about extracting many hardcore bits and efficient PRGs in a little bit briefer subject matter. The other two main results to kind of flag these as interesting things that we can do with limited non-determinism. So first, let's imagine how we could extract some hardcore bits from some limited non-deterministic one-way function. Here's our wrong intuition first. Suppose f is a one-way function against limited non-determinism. We have the probability boosting from the previous arguments, and so if we could prove that there was a super hardcore bit, maybe we could use the probability boosting lemma to boost the success chance of inverting that super hardcore bit and then extract lots of bits from this. And something along these lines has been used in the exponential security regime before. There's a problem with this, though. A problem with super hardcore bits. Any sort of non-deterministic, limited non-deterministic argument that runs component-wise will fail. We will run out of our budget of limited non-determinism. A list decoding style argument like a traditional Goldreich 11 for hardcore bits cannot really be used here. If we are running the limited non-deterministic algorithm component-wise, even if we're using only one witness bit every time, that will use up at least n witness bits, and it's exceeding our budget significantly. We need to somehow do everything at once and reuse witness bits as much as we can. Without a guarantee, that we can reuse witness bits, we will run into some serious trouble. I also want to note that there is a black box barrier for very hard Boolean functions. But if there's one takeaway, it is that we cannot rerun limited non-deterministic algorithms without being very careful. But here is our main theorem statement for many hardcore bits. If we have f that is one way against limited non-deterministic adversaries with access to phi non-deterministic bits, then, and A is a random matrix, then the tuple A f of x, A of x is computationally indistinguishable from A f of x, a uniform phi bits for all PPT distinguishers. Let's recall the hardcore bit classical result. Recall that if we can distinguish the inner product of x and r from a random bit, then we can predict the inner product of x and r. And if we can predict the inner product of x and r, we can use the Goldreich 11 reduction to recover x. Our initial idea will be to use non-deterministic bits to guess all but one of the vector ax, hard code that, and then use that in a standard Goldreich 11 framework. That's exactly what we're going to do. So let A1 through A5 be the rows of A via a distinguisher to predictor style argument. If that tuple A f of x ax is computationally distinguishable from A f of x u of x, then there exists some index so that given the first L pieces of that tuple, a f of x and then a1x through al minus 1x, we can predict the next one. If we can predict the next one, alx, then we can use a Goldreich-Levin style argument to recover x. That is exactly what we do. The idea is we, at random, guess the first L minus 1 rows of A and hard code them. We now non-deterministically sample A1x, A2x, etc. That's going to only use L minus 1 bits. Once we've non-deterministically sampled those, going just back to the previous slide, given that whole initial prefix, we can predict ALX. If we can predict ALX with 1 over poly chance, we can run a Goldreich-Levin decoder with many different R's taking the role of AL. And all that remains to do is argue that randomly guessing the first rows of the matrix is good with enough probability, but that can be done. Which gives us our main result here for hardcore bits. We are now able to extract phi hardcore bits at once if F is one way against limited non-deterministic adversaries with access to phi hardcore bits. And finally, if we can extract a lot of hardcore bits at once, we can build efficient PRGs. Very briefly, a very quick overview of the state of the art of PRGs. If we have a one-way function that's secure against non-uniform polytime algorithms, we can non-adaptively obtain a PRG with seed length approximately n to the fourth over log n squared. Given an exponentially hard one-way function, we can obtain a PRG with seed length n squared. Our result is as follows. Given F that is one way against limited non-deterministic adversaries that have access to phi non-deterministic bits, then there exists a construction of a non-uniform polytime secure PRG with seed length n to the fourth over phi squared. The nice thing is we can see how this interpolates in between the results for a PRG that's secure against a standard one-way function or an exponentially secure one-way function. In the standard one-way function case, we can think of our phi non-deterministic bits as log n. We can always simply guess log n non-deterministic bits without using any non-determinism at all. We could actually just iterate through all of them in our polytime setting. And so on one end, if phi is equal to log n, that's the classical case, no non-determinism at all. We have seed length n to the fourth over log squared n. If phi is equal to, say, root n, an intermediate, we're going to get a seed length of n cubed. And if phi is some constant times n, constant less than 1, we're now going to get a seed length of n squared, matching the state-of-the-art result for exponentially secure one-way functions. So finally, just as a brief overview of what we've talked about today, we motivated and defined limited non-determinism in a cryptographic setting, and we showed that that allows us to prove a dream hardness amplification result, extract many hardcore bits all at once, and build very efficient PRGs, interpolating between state-of-the-art results. Thank you.